you like health and if you like people that live a long time, it's the most important position. RFK Jr., we want you to come up with things and ideas and what you've been talking about for a long time, and I think you're going to do some unbelievable thing. Nobody's going to be able to do it like you, and boy, does he feel it in his heart. So congratulations also to your family.
And there you have it. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. will head the Department of Health and Human Services, a very quick ascension to a major Trump administration post for Kennedy after quite the political transformation over the last year. Back in the summer of 2023, RFK Jr. was a Democratic presidential candidate. Fast forward 1 year, an independent presidential candidate, and now a loyal ally to President-elect Trump. And in another announcement, North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum has been tapped to lead the Department of the Interior. In a flurry of unusual appointments this week, Trump will certainly be testing Congress and the loyalty of Republicans. Joining me now is the Hill's national political reporter, Kate Martell. Kate, I know it's been quite a week. We've been talking about how shocked we've been with some of these picks. I'm not saying shocked in a good way or a bad way, but it's certainly been, some of them have been a bit unusual. So let's start with RFK Jr. His nomination to head the Department of Health and Human Services maybe came as a surprise to some, but maybe not for most others. We know that Kennedy has a track record of controversial health claims. How worried are health experts, and how much power will he wield in this position?
Well, Julia, first I can say that health experts are fairly concerned. There is a lot of power that comes with running health and human services. That comes with 13 separate agencies and a budget of roughly $2 trillion. This is a massive government program that has a lot of power, including approving new drugs, namely vaccines. He is very notably an anti-vaccine activist, and that does concern some of the experts and most people within the health community. There's also, he has some other controversial views, including on raw, unpasteurized milk. He's an advocate for drinking that when the FDA urges against it because there's harmful bacteria and viruses in it. So he does come with a lot of power in that position, and that's why we're seeing the health community fairly shaken up by this pick. You know, we did see a few weeks ago, the Trump transition co-chair even said he's not getting a job at HHS. Well, 2 weeks later, yes, he did.
Yeah, I think we were expecting this, but I think the effect of it from the Trump team's perspective was sort of to shake up who they say are the elite or the establishment in Washington. So certainly quite a week for that. And talking about shaking things up, Trump's nomination of former Congressman Matt Gaetz for Attorney General increasingly looks very uphill in the Senate. Republican lawmakers are warning that the nomination is in serious trouble. So what are they saying, Kate?
Yeah, his nomination is going to be an upward battle, to say the least. We've already seen some hesitation from several senators, including Senators Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins. They're fairly moderate senators within the Republican caucus, so you expect them to team up together. They already have a fairly healthy majority in the Senate. It looks like it'll be a 53-seat Senate majority for Republicans. They have some room to work with, but you know, there's already a lot of criticism that we're hearing and a lot of concern even within the Republican conference. The Senate Judiciary Committee Chair, Dick Durbin, did say that he would like to see the contents of this House ethics report. So I think a lot will hinge on what is in that, assuming we end up seeing it in the end. But so far, we're starting to see some of this hesitation and worry about Matt Gaetz, depending on, you know, what happened in his past based on what's in this pending House ethics report that's now moot. So we're starting to see some of this opposition starting to build. I think it's going to be a fairly upward battle over the next few months, Julia.
Well, and speaking of that House ethics report, we know that, like you said, the committee was set to release its findings from the investigation, but instead canceled a planned meeting. Since then, we know that Matt Gaetz has resigned from Congress. So what are the chances that it could be released, and will the Senate fight for access? I mean, I was looking into this. This isn't completely unprecedented. We know that there has been a report released with a previous member of Congress a number of years ago who had since resigned, but are you getting the sense this could actually happen?
Yeah, from what I'm hearing, it sounds like we have not heard the end of this report. Yes, the Health Ethics Committee can only have jurisdiction over sitting House members, and he has already resigned from Congress. So, yes, it technically doesn't have the ramifications that it might had he stayed in the House. But that being said, it's not over with. There's a lot of interest from senators, both Republicans and Democrats, to see the contents of what's in this report. So there will be some challenges that I expect will play out over the next few weeks. But, we're seeing a lot of Senate staffers over the next few months. Their job on committees is to do due diligence on all of these nominees. And whatever is in this report is likely very applicable to his confirmation process. So you can imagine why committee staff on both sides would want to know before they get to the confirmation hearings, both in committee and then when they make it to the final Senate confirmation vote. So I expect we will probably see them at some point, but it's hard to know quite 100% certain yet.
Yeah, Senator John Cornyn from the Senate Judiciary Committee saying he would like to see that. Speaking of senators, we know that these nominations certainly put Republicans like Cornyn, but also, most importantly, Senate Majority Leader John Thune in a very difficult spot on day one. We know that Republicans, most notably John Thune, are looking to be on Trump's good side and move his nomination forward, but at the same time, we know that Thune, he's not anti-Trump, but he has pushed back against Trump in the past. So how do you think he's going to approach this going forward? And also, how is he going to approach this issue of recess appointments?
Yeah, so the fact that Senator John Thune is now the incoming GOP leader does make this interesting because he's not necessarily a personal ally of President-elect Trump. So I think that'll be interesting, specifically that it's Thune over Cornyn or Senator Scott, two senators that were up for the position. I think the way that he's likely going to handle this is try to push them through, like, for example, with Matt Gaetz, who's fairly controversial. Senator Lindsey Graham said, hey, let's give him a shot. Let's have this play out, in the Senate. So I expect that he will bring as many of these nominees up to the floor for a vote as he can. But look, Julia, he has a 53-seat majority to work with. And Trump would have had a very easy time with some of his earlier nominations gliding through the Senate. Now that he's picked a few of these more controversial ones that give us, more to talk about, and there's more of a complicated dynamic, it's really going to muddy the waters for President-elect Trump's first 100 days. That's when he has an ambitious agenda that we'll see over the coming weeks. And now it looks like the Senate will be spending a lot of time on playing this out. And that's why, I think over the next few weeks on Capitol Hill, they're hoping that the remaining nominees that we see will hopefully be easy to pass in the Senate so they don't have to waste as much time.
One of the other dynamics during this lame duck period in Washington that we're looking at is what Democrats are doing to really take advantage of these next 2 months. We know that they're putting pressure on Biden to look at any aggressive or creative actions before leaving office in an effort to blunt Trump's power and create a type of firewall against the president-elect's promise to make massive changes. So, Kate, what are Democrats looking specifically for Biden to take action on?
Yeah, well, Democrats are trying to figure out what can they do over the next few weeks to try to solidify Biden's legacy and try not to undo everything in the next administration that Democrats have been working towards in the past 4 years. There's been talk of maybe sending more aid to Ukraine, not knowing what the future of that will be in a Republican administration. There's also talk from one Democratic lawmaker of maybe tweaking the union contracts for federal workers, because we do know that this newly formed department, where it's going to have Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, is trying to work on government efficiency. That may not benefit government workers, so there's talk of trying to tweak their contracts in advance to try to help save them. But I think the biggest thing that they're going to be focusing on over the next few weeks is confirming as many of President Biden's judicial picks as possible.
Kate, I want to turn our attention to something you're writing about. You're writing about the mass exodus from Elon Musk's social media platform X, formerly known as Twitter, before he bought it. So how many people have been leaving and where are they going?
Yeah, a lot of people have been leaving X, formerly known as Twitter, since Election Day, Julia. More than 115,000 people left right after the election. And they're actually headed to two competitors. Instagram Threads, which has been around for some time, but the more interesting one is Blue Sky. In a 24-hour period the other day, they got 1 million new users, and they're up to more than 15 million active users. And for people that haven't seen it yet, it looks very, very similar to the old Twitter that we were used to several years ago. So we're starting to see a movement of people, including some journalists, leaving the platform or jumping onto this Blue Sky platform that looks very similar to Twitter. But there's been a lot of concern that, Elon Musk helped elect President-elect Trump. And I know there were some concerns from people, particularly on the left, that they've been seeing a lot of right-wing content on the app and are worried about the tweaks to the algorithms. And we're looking to jump ship. And it looks like Blue Sky might be winning that battle because they're right now at the top of the charts, followed by Instagram Threads, the other competitor.
I've been seeing a lot of people posting about their move to Blue Sky, so certainly a name to watch in the coming days and weeks for information and news consumption. Kate Martell, as always, thank you.
Thanks, Julia.
President-elect Trump's promise of mass deportation and increased border security are one step closer to fruition, with South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem taking the helm of the Department of Homeland Security. Noem, a fierce Trump loyalist, has aligned herself with Trump's stance on immigration and will most certainly be using her power to execute President-elect Trump's border and immigration policy. Joining me now is the Hill staff writer Rafael Bernal to make sense of what's next. Rafael, Kristi Noem, obviously Trump loyalists, didn't come as necessarily a surprise, but what does this mean for migrants at the end of the day? I mean, she's sort of I don't want to say put a rubber stamp, but she's gone along with everything Trump has said on this matter.
Yeah, I think the key word, you said it, it's loyalist. She's been a very good MAGA communicator on this, uses the word invasion all the time to talk about immigration, and, supported Greg Abbott, governor of Texas, said she would send him some razor wire.
Yeah.
So she's more of a communicator. We don't know what experience she has on the executive side implementing immigration policy, but we do know that basically all of Trump's promises should be taken seriously. Especially with Tom Homan as border czar and Stephen Miller in the White House.
Well, and she has to go through a confirmation process, and we've been having this discussion during the show about, how does this impact Matt Gaetz or even Robert F. Kennedy Jr., particularly with Senate moderate Republicans Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins. Does Kristi Noem face the same questions that Robert F. Kennedy or Pete Hegseth or the others face, or is she in a different category?
She's in a different category, and she could have been slightly controversial. Let's remember, she's a governor.
Right.
She actually has an elected position.
Yeah.
She could have been slightly controversial, but in the face of Gaetz, I don't think the Senate is going to spend too much time fighting the Kristi Noem. You will expect maybe a Senator Alex Padilla of California to give her a hard time in her nomination hearings, but that's about it.
Right. And, I want to move to this promise of mass deportations. You're hearing Tom Homan getting questioned on it. You're probably going to see Kristi Noem get questions on it as well. Trump's talking about it. But we talk about the economic costs of it and just how much it will cost to do this. I mean, there are migrants in this country who are here legally and illegally who contribute to the economy. So that's question one. I mean, what are the costs of removing them? And then question two is, this could cost millions, billions of dollars to carry out. Who's going to foot that bill?
If it does happen, the American taxpayer. Yeah. That's the only person, the only people who can pay for it. Some groups have said it will cost up to $30 billion. I think it's hard to put a figure on it. But the real question here is the limitations for Homan and Miller and Trump and Noem in carrying out this deportation, mass deportation policy are clearly not political. They're clearly not legal at this point. That's what Democrats talk about when the guardrails are off. But they are logistical and they are budgetary. Mm-hmm. They are going to have to move a lot of money if they want to do it to that scale. And I don't know if Congress Congress might not complain about the mass deportations themselves, but they might complain about the budget.
Right. And, Congress has some time before this takes place. President Biden also has some time before this takes place. He's in office till mid-January. So what are immigration and immigrant advocacy groups telling President Biden or signaling? What do they want him to do in the meantime before these deportations could end up happening?
Well, the advocacy groups basically want him to do everything in his power on an executive basis to extend benefits for certain groups of immigrants. Temporary protected status, for instance, the extension can be up to 18 months. If the Department of Homeland Security were to renew all the TPS benefits that exist currently, that would give those beneficiaries 18 months before their benefits expire and sort of time to adjust to a Trump administration.
I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about something that's happening in the news as we speak, the case of Laken Riley, the young college student at a university in Georgia who was killed while jogging earlier this year, allegedly by an undocumented migrant or someone who was here illegally. That case is going to trial, and we know that the Trump campaign really used that case to make their own case about immigration. How do cases like this, and there have been a few the Trump campaign has talked about, how do they impact people's political views of immigration?
Well, it's a really fine line, and it's really difficult because on one hand, everybody needs to be respectful of the victims and the victims' families, and that has to. They have been victimized and recognize that. On the other hand, there is the danger that by highlighting these cases, people like this alleged murderer, who's not an example to anyone, can be sort of generalized to an entire population, and then put that population at risk for on the other end. And so it's really important to separate both things. But it is something that the Trump administration has done. In the first Trump administration, they started this office known as Voice. It fizzled out over time, but it was basically an office that was going to highlight instances like this. And immigrant rights groups, they complained pretty aggressively because they thought it was more about the generalization than about giving a voice to these victims.
Right. Certainly a very difficult situation, a very sad situation, but something that has played out in politics here and will likely play out in the coming weeks and months to come. Rafael, Bernal, as always, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
Newly elected members of Congress met on the steps of the Capitol this morning for their class photo. It's a tradition for freshman members during the 10-day orientation following the election. New this year, congressional orientation includes an app to help the new members get acquainted with the Capitol and the House office buildings, as well as the rules and procedures of their new gig. The House Administration Committee also brought back a nonpartisan hospitality suite where the new members can mingle with both sides of the aisle. On the agenda next week, the soon-to-be lawmakers will also participate in a room lottery to get assigned an office for the next 2 years. All told, there are 59 new representatives and 12 new senators in the 119th Congress. And that's today's Daily Debrief. I'm Julia Manchester. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Hill's YouTube channel. And come back here soon for the intersection between politics and policy.